Hi, everybody. Welcome to Progressive HR Live. I'm your host, Kareen Woodman-Hullebeck of Progressive HR, and I'm here with the fabulous Beth Ridley, CEO of the Brimful Life, management consultant, expert contributor for TMJ for the Morning Blend in Milwaukee and BizTimes Media, and a good friend of mine. So hi, Beth. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. If you're joining now, the live, just please go ahead and let us know who you are, where you're joining from in the comments, and we'll be starting with our questions soon. So, Beth, where are you streaming from today?
From the balmy, beautiful Whitefish Bay.
Oh my goodness. I have not been to Whitefish Bay. So I've never been to Whitefish Bay. No.
Well, you have to come. We have a store called Winkies. We have a Sendix. We have a lake. We have some nice parks. I like it because we have a lot of sidewalks and lots of places where we can walk. And I love, like, when the weather's nicer, to be able to walk to. It reminds me of, I call Whitefish Bay the Brooklyn of Milwaukee. I lived in Brooklyn, New York for 10 years. And what I loved about Brooklyn is you could walk everywhere. You actually didn't even have to go into Manhattan to get what you needed. And so when we moved here, I said, I just want sidewalks and places where I can walk. So that's what I like most about Whitefish Bay.
When I lived in London, you could walk anywhere. And I mean, really, that's what I loved about living in Europe, is that you didn't need to have a car. You could just walk anywhere or ride the tube anywhere you wanted to go. So I am streaming from Madison, Wisconsin. Let's go to our audience now and see who's joining us and where they're streaming from. Hi, Carrie. Carrie is streaming from Evanston, Illinois. Thanks for joining us, Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
We have Joanne Kruger from New Berlin.
Is it New Berlin or New Berlin?
Oh, that's a question. I don't know. I call it New Berlin.
Oh, that's funny. I call it New Berlin or New Berlin.
We'll have to figure that out. Yeah. And then Kristen Struck from Fox Point. Hi, Kristen.
Welcome. I know Kristen. Yeah. I didn't know Kristen was in Fox Point. You're near me.
And then Taraji checking from Waukesha. Hi, Taraji.
Hi, Taraji.
Yep. And then so Joanne says it's the second. So
New Berlin.
New Berlin.
Oh, New Berlin.
And then we have Daniel Ryan from another one.
Another one. My friend.
And then we have another LinkedIn user joining from Milwaukee. I'm going to figure out who that is really quickly. So, he says he loves Winkies. I'm not really sure what Winkies is. So what is Winkies?
Oh, it's just like a little convenience store, general store in Whitefish Bay. So they have like candy and cards upstairs and like toys and trinkets and stuff downstairs. It's an institution. It's been around forever.
So that was from Kristen Strunk, and it was Carissa Mashlin joining from Milwaukee. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get into our conversation and our questions now. If you have any questions for Beth or for myself, please let us know in the comments. I'll be mashing up my questions for Beth with your questions and comments for Beth. And we're going to be talking about digital wellness and health and wellness in general today. So, Beth, I really want you to tell us, what is the Brimful Life about?
Well, I started the Brimful Life really to focus on bringing out the best in everyone at work. So for all of my career, I've worked in corporate, and I think anyone who works, in a workplace knows that it can either suck the life out of you and be completely draining, or it can be super exhilarating and a great way to learn and grow. And so the Brimful Life is a consulting firm that helps leaders do the latter. by being really aware and have some intentionality around the way that they lead. So I don't focus on big initiatives or programs, but really helping leaders just integrate well-being, equity, diversity, inclusion, strong leadership principles into their day-to-day to help transform their culture to be, thriving workplace cultures.
Thanks, Beth. I appreciate that. Beth and I know each other, and I'm not exactly sure when it was that we got to particularly know each other. I think it was through Disrupt Milwaukee, but then also, from No Studios. So, do you remember how we got to start chatting?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
Sure. I know when we met, we were not wearing masks.
Yes.
So that's kind of like how I, know people now. Was it before we were wearing a mask, or did I meet you since we've been wearing masks? So I met you pre-mask.
Pre-mask. Okay, that's very interesting. So when did you decide to build a company that focuses on workplace culture?
Yeah, so I guess the idea started to percolate with me maybe about 5 years ago or so. So I left my corporate job 2 years ago to start, but the idea was sort of spinning in my head. And because the company that I was working for at the time was going through a lot of organizational changes, and it was really disruptive, causing a lot of stress and anxiety. And my role as a department head, as a leader in that organization, was to lead through these changes. And quite frankly, I was struggling myself with burnout because, it was really stressful for me to, lay people off and eliminate roles. Certainly a different kind of stress than being on the receiving end of having your role eliminated, but it was stressful for me nonetheless. And so I turned to studying positive psychology just so that I could, sort of navigate my team through these changes with more resilience and positivity, and bring that presence into what I was doing. So in the process of doing that, I really learned that there are really small, simple things that are very accessible that we can all do in our day-to-day to kind of boost a more positive mindset, even when things around us are not going our way, or even when things around us are negative. So I actually started bringing some of these principles into work. I started first with my own leadership. Then I sort of extended some of these principles into my leadership team and invited them to incorporate that into their leadership. And I really did find that it made a huge difference. And even during a really turbulent time at work, our team was achieving very high engagement scores. So long story short, the organization was still struggling with a lot of burnout and anxiety. And so the benefits department had come to me and said, Beth, some of these things that you're doing with integrating positive psychology at work, it's working in your department. Is there any way that we could sort of extend some of these practices enterprise-wide? Because we want to get ahead of, burnout and stress and anxiety and people having to leave work for short-term disability because of those reasons. And that was the first time that it sort of came to me, if this company is asking me for help with the little strategies that I'm doing, I think I could add value to other companies to do that. And I really do like working with, I work with companies of all sizes and all industries, but I really do like working with smaller companies, small to mid-sized companies, because these small things can actually have such a big impact. And you don't have to spend a ton of money on big initiatives, and you can actually see the results right away. So that really energizes me. So that's sort of the story of how I started doing this. And I would say when I first started almost 2 years ago, only a certain kind of leader or a certain kind of company was really interested in focusing on things like burnout and building more resilience and fostering a culture of belonging. Well, thank you, global pandemic, and also a lot of the things that have been happening in the community in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. Equity, diversity, inclusion has now been a priority in a lot of companies. So now I would say a lot of companies, because of circumstance, they're really focusing on some of these things that are just good practices, no matter the environment. Like, forget the pandemic, forget social unrest. These are just fundamental good things that we tended to not prioritize. You know, when times are good, you can overlook a lot. But I think that if you have an unhealthy culture, the cracks are going to show at some point. And so again, it's about maintaining and investing them in not a big way, but in tiny things that leaders can do each and every day that make a big difference.
Yeah, that's so important. And you know, the topic of our discussion today is digital wellness. And since the pandemic, we've had this discussion around wellness and self-care and how it's really grown. And what we moving online, and that can have a very different effect than being in an office. And now, you know, we're moving online, we're doing back-to-back Zooms, we're exhausted, we're screen exhausted.
Yeah.
And our society is digitizing more because people are looking for entertainment that's not just going outside because you don't want to go outside. You do, but you can't. You have to be 6 feet apart, and in a lot of the spaces that are normal entertainment where we went to unwind and relax are not open anymore. So generally, we just have a lot of more increased feelings of isolation, and generally, we're just all out of sorts.
Yeah.
So what is the difference? What's different about your approach to wellness and self-care in this digitized environment?
Well, so some of it I talked about is like, it doesn't really have to be big initiatives. It can be very small things that you can do and integrate into your own day-to-day, and things that translate really well even on Zoom and when you're engaging with people virtually, because it is not a big separate program or initiative. So it's sort of portable in a in-person as well as an online environment. But the things that I really focus on is around emotional connection. So that would be emotional connection to others and a sense of belonging. And then also an emotional connection to the work. And that means tying work to a higher purpose and meaning. And again, I think it's a little bit different in this virtual environment, but there's for sure things that actually in some regards the virtual environment enables, and it can kind of accelerate some of these things. So a good example would be like a sense of belonging and connection with others. I'm a big believer in, when it comes to team building, there should be a lot of team building that has absolutely nothing to do with work. Like, not everything has to focus on work. And again, if the purpose of team building is to build meaningful relationships and trust with one another, if that is the purpose, it's totally appropriate to do team building that doesn't always have like a leadership moral to the event. You know what I mean? And virtually, you have the opportunity to do things that you simply couldn't do in person, again, especially for small companies if you don't have a big budget to fly people places. But I've been with my clients using a lot of online experiences through Airbnb online experiences, right? So if you're familiar with Airbnb, they also offer a lot of like in-person experiences when you travel to go stay someplace. Someone who's local, has a passion about that city, can take you on a tour or offer a cooking, demonstration or something like that. They've transported all of that stuff to online. You can literally travel the world. You can do ramen noodle tasting in Japan. You can do a street art tour in Rio. And so I've been, organizing some things or suggesting for clients that they get together with their team members and they do something fun to push them outside of their comfort zone, to learn and grow together using Airbnb experiences. So these are things that we probably wouldn't thought about doing, pre-pandemic, that, I know that we're all frustrated by being virtual, but you know what? There are some positive elements. So lean into those things and take advantage of some of these things that honestly, this wasn't even an option a year ago.
Mm-hmm. And I think I saw it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the segment that you did for the Wellness Council of Wisconsin, you have a card deck that talks about leadership, pulling out the card deck. It's, what is it, like 1,000 ways to ask how are you?
Oh, that one. Well, which card deck? I have so many.
Deck? You got so many.
So this is the one that you're talking about. Yes.
How are you? I really like that one. So like how many, it's 100 ways to ask how are you?
Well, okay, you set the bar high. It's 52 because it's a card deck.
Oh, okay. See, like I did say correctly.
But you know what? If you buy 2 card decks, then it is 100. It's 104.
104.
Yeah, well, you asked also what's different about my approach. Again, equipping people with small little things that are, most of them are free to do or very inexpensive. And so, yes, I think that, again, how do you create a sense of belonging in your day-to-day? Ask better questions. Don't ask, how are you? Because you just, you ask it and you move on. You don't even listen to the answer, and everybody's going to say fine. But ask something more creative, like, what are you learning that's new? Or what are you excited about today? One, it shows that you're curious about someone, and that adds to a sense of belonging, because everybody wants to feel like you care about them as a unique human and not just as an employee. Two, you actually learn something kind of interesting, and you'd be surprised. You know what? I do a lot of equity, diversity, and inclusion education and consulting. And I always tell people, if you want to lead with an inclusive mindset, you want to be a leader with an inclusive mindset, you just have to look for little ways to show people that you're interested in getting to know who they uniquely are. And the best question you can ask is, tell me about your name. And so people always do that, and they're floored by what they learn. These are people you see every single day. And just by asking them, tell me about your name, you learn maybe something that has to do with the ethnic heritage of their name, or family tradition, or what their name really is, but what they changed it to, or their nickname, or do they like their name? Do they not like their name? People can't get enough of just that question. So tip, right? The next time you're with someone or with your team, just spend 5 minutes and say, let's go around and everybody share something about your name. They really like it, and you learn so much. And that's the beauty of equity, diversity, inclusion, because if you just pause and take just a smidgen of time to get to know someone, it deepens relationships, it broadens your own perspective, and that's the two ingredients that foster that culture of belonging.
Yeah. So let's ask our audience. Tell us about your name.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So anybody who wants to share with us, I guess I'll go first. Kareen. So Kareen is my mom's made up name. I'm the only Kareen that's spelled that way in the world. And it's because she wanted to nickname me Corey, and for no other reason. That was it. But it means the maiden in Greek.
Oh, I love it that you are the only one in the world with that name. I can't say that for Beth. I'm probably one of a bazillion. But I am it's Elizabeth Louise. I'm named after my two grandmothers, which is special to me because they were deceased before I was even born. And so I feel like, carry a little bit of them with me.
Oh, that's just very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're waiting for the audience to respond, if they care to share, I have another question for you. That would be, as we transform digitally, how should we be building in more emotional connection? And you did highlight a little bit about this in the last question, but I wanted you to go further in depth and maybe talk about finding more joy and meaning at work.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think we are finding how important that is in this very stressful environment that we find ourselves. So when you talk about emotional connection, I talked about having an emotional connection to your work with connecting what you do with higher purpose and meaning, having an emotional connection with your colleagues and deepening relationships. But the one that we always neglect and is so important is emotional connection with yourself and putting yourself first. And I think especially in this digital environment, it's like we don't get a break. We're all in, working, meetings back to back, and then many people are working online, but then also homeschooling, the whole situation. So a couple of things that I think are important to put yourself first. So the first is to actually prioritize putting yourself first. We're just not good at that, but we do schedule going to the doctor and to the dentist. So I say schedule time, a little bit of time every day, just for you, whether that's first thing in the morning, and if you like to work out, or simply just read a little bit or listen to music or schedule a walk in the middle of the afternoon or schedule a glass of wine with your spouse in the evening, whatever. Build that time in. If it's scheduled, you're more likely to do it. And I find that if you even carve out 15 minutes for yourself during the course of the day, you really reduce the feeling of resentment of you're giving so much to everybody else and you have nothing left for yourself. So 15 minutes can actually make a huge difference. So that would be one. The other thing that we just simply overlook and don't do enough of is playing to our strengths more every day. That's another way to invest in yourself. And so when I say strengths, I mean things that you're naturally good at, but things that give you energy to do. My experience at work is that we're often told, or the focus is on what we need to do better, or what we're not good enough at, or the development gaps that we have. Not to say you shouldn't focus on development, but again, if you want to invest in your own joy and meaning and that extra motivation that you need to sort of get over those hard days, tap more into and utilize more what you uniquely do well and find ways to bring that forward. And then the third is, and I had mentioned this, I'm a big believer in do things that have nothing to do with work. You need that break from work so that when you are at work, again, you're fully present, you're not resentful. Honestly, doing things outside of work makes you a more interesting person. You continue to learn and grow. And I think we got to build in fun. So whether that's small things that, make sure you invest time in a hobby. A couple of years ago when I was feeling down in the dumps at my job, I challenged myself to do one new thing a week for a year. That's another card deck. 52 things, one new thing a week for a year. Some of these things were super simple to do. Like, it wasn't like big things like skydiving. But even just the small little things built my confidence. It made me realize that, the world is a big place and there's lots of joy and meaning in it. Even when things, again, are not going well, it builds your resilience and boosts positivity. So I think it's just, more joy and meaning in the current environment that we're in means that we simply it's there. We just have to prioritize it. And it's good for business. It really is. People feel guilty, like, oh, I'm not, fully focused on work. But if you're only focused on work and you never take a break, you get depleted. You start to feel resentful and you're not your best. So those are kind of my suggestions of things that we should pay attention to and make sure that we do going forward.
And I think I remember you said that meetings, like if you're a leader of a meeting, what is it that if you can't explain what the purpose of the meeting is?
Yeah. So back to purpose and back to, the way to boost engagement and for people to feel a sense of meaning in their work is to connect their task, their job to the higher purpose and meaning, the vision, the mission of the organization. So I think it's a really great strategy. And again, it takes an extra 30 seconds for anyone, facilitating a meeting, holding a meeting, to remind people of the purpose, the higher purpose of that meeting. Because a lot of times we meet, it's a regular meeting. It's like, we show up, we just launch in, like we all know why we're here. Well, actually, it's nice to be reminded. And if you cannot actually articulate how the meeting connects with the higher purpose and mission, then you maybe shouldn't have the meeting and then give people their time back. So I think it's a good thing to challenge yourself to do.
And when you talked about playing to our strengths or working our strengths into our work, what is one? I know that when I was watching your TMJ4 episode, you talked about an example of your coworker who interjects her strength for cooking.
Yeah, so this is a big thing, and I'll talk about this more if we have time, but I want to answer your question. So I consult with companies, and which means I usually sort of work with the CEO, executive, and their senior leadership team over like the course of a year to how they transform their cultures by transforming their leadership in these small ways. What I'm realizing is that there's a huge need to go directly to employees as well, because so much of being your best and finding joy in meaning what you do is within the employee's control, right? Also, so I've started to now also think about what are ways to do that directly to employees. And one of them is to challenge employees to tap into their strengths. Again, like we talked about, things that you're good at, but also that bring you energy. So I actually have this mastermind class that I did. And so to get to that, and one person who actually was a guest speaker talked about how she was really struggling at work. Things weren't going well. You know, she just wasn't feeling good about it. Not sure if she should leave her job. So she tapped into her strength, which is baking. She just loves to bake, and she never made time for it. But it was also something that she could do with her young kids. So she just started baking with her young kids, and finding that that gave her a lot of energy. And so the way that she could infuse that into her work is that she was a project manager. So when she had to give her updates, she would just give like a little pro baking tip, like, how to separate egg whites, or she would give her favorite recipe, and she would just sprinkled a little bit of what she loves and what gave her joy and meaning into her work. And people loved it. They read those reports. I mean, so it actually translated into better business. And I think people like to see what's unique about people at work, and we often don't allow ourselves to do that because we feel that we'll be laughed at, it's inappropriate, it's not business-like. But I think in the right doses, bringing forward what makes someone unique makes work more interesting. I mean, that's the value of being in an environment with other people. You get to be exposed to new things and see the essence of someone and still get the work done. And in some regards, get it done better. She's more energized because of that. She sort of got her groove back, so to speak, at work. And people really enjoy sort of what she's doing, and leading by example, showing that you can bring more of who you are into the workplace. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love that example.
As do I. And Lisa says, amen.
Amen, Lisa.
So going back to our question that we asked the audience is about our names. So Joanne says that her mom's father passed away when she was 12, and his name was Joe. And if she had a boy, he may have been, if she was a boy, if she had a boy, he may have been named after him, but instead she named me Joanne. Oh, that's a nice story.
That's nice. I'm telling you, it never fails. There's always an interesting story, always an interesting story. Well, thanks for sharing that, Joanne.
And I think Taraji is very interesting. Her name's Arabic, for one who joins in prayer. I just never knew that. Wow. Mm-hmm. And she's a prayer warrior. So I think that's something new that I learned about Taraji today. Her parents converted to Islam after my two sisters, Tracy and Tammy. Oh, that's nice.
Really interesting. Thank you, Taraji.
We have a few more here. And Lisa says that I am Elizabeth too, and my parents chose to nickname me Lisa.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? No, my sister's name is Lisa, so that was not an option so I guess then I became a Beth. Yes. I guess Elizabeth has become sort of an old school name. I don't hear it so much. It used to be really common, I thought, when I was growing up. I was definitely not the only Beth. It doesn't come up that much anymore these days.
Well, there's lots of Queen Elizabeths. So, yeah. But I think people are more, naming has like widened as we diversify, as we explore more diversification with people. That's what I think.
You're right. I would agree.
So going back to what we talked about meetings, I want to ask you this question because this is something, as I was reading LinkedIn news, was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was yesterday. And on LinkedIn news, and now I cannot find this article anywhere. I went onto LinkedIn News today and I tried to find it, but I cannot find it anywhere. But it was talking about the new integrations or the new roles being added to the C-suite. And one of the new roles that they're suggesting adding is the Chief Meetings Officer. purely for the faction of making sure that the meetings that are scheduled are purposeful, that they help out, or they do not create burnout or stress, or that they're part of a wellness, and for many other reasons. Again, I tried to find the article, but I couldn't. So what is your perspective on LinkedIn's suggestion that the role of CMO will be added to the C-suite?
Yeah. So when you first told me that, a couple thoughts. One, change the name of that role, because that's not anyone I want to have a meeting with. Like if you see the chief meeting officer put a meeting, like, well, that sounds enjoyable. That sounds like, that sounds fun. No, I think they could have a better name for it. I appreciate the spirit of it. It goes a little bit against my own philosophy, which is, again, don't put these things that are so important when it comes to wellness out there. And I don't know if it has to be the job of someone else. It's the job of everyone with small little things that you do day to day. So I have to know a little bit more about the job, but those were my gut reactions. Horrible title. Or at least come up with something that evokes the spirit of what they're trying to do, which is more purpose and meaning and wellness. Chief meeting officer. And then hopefully that chief meeting officer won't be the one to inject all that stuff in the meetings themselves, but they will equip the leaders to be able to do it.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure. I liked that they're putting emphasis on someone, helping people like control meetings, because there's a lot of meetings and a lot of unpurposeful meetings. But now listening to you and saying like we could have a better title, and is it really necessary? I'm kind of on the fence now. We've got Joanne says, sounds like chief medical officer. Yeah, yes. So yeah, there's a lot of CMO, chief marketing officer, chief medical officer, chief meetings officer, and Daniel Ryan saying chief marketing officer as well. So yeah, to Beth's point, we need another title because it'll get confusing.
And I'm wondering who's applying for that job. Yeah, I'm wondering what kind of people and what kind of backgrounds would apply for that job. I'd be curious to know.
I know. I tried to find that article. So if you do go onto Google and you do Google chief meetings officer, there is an article from last year about it. So, but I didn't think that was relevant enough for what we were talking about, because I was actually trying to find the LinkedIn news article. Audience, if you do go onto LinkedIn today and you do see it come up, please message me, because I'd really like to find the article or the highlight that talked about that. Carrie says that chief meeting officer seems like a lot of added overhead for skills and practices that become part of a healthy organization.
Yeah. I agree with you, Carrie. I mean, you were more direct than me. I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Maybe the chief meetings officers dialed in. They're watching. I don't want to hurt their feelings.
Oh my goodness. So that really as we're laughing here, it brings me to my next question. Oh, we just had another comment come up. I'm going to see who that is. I like this one. Bam, best ever awesome meeting manager.
There you go. At least people will apply for that job.
Yes. Come on, HR professionals. We got to be a little bit more creative with titles. Thank you, Lisa.
Mm-hmm. Lisa's onto something.
She is. And carrying on with that, I now remember when I think you and I first connected. I sent you a message because I saw your talk with hashtag Milwaukee. I think it was.
Oh yeah.
I want to make kale being. I want to make doing nothing the new kale.
Yeah,
and I love that.
Being busy, the new smoking, doing nothing the new kale, because we have to get away from this culture of always doing, and that so over rotation on productivity without, again, building in the mindfulness, the resilience. There's just the time to recharge to be productive. Actually, yes. So that was it. And then we met in person at Disrupt HR.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first one, and I loved it. So then I approached you afterwards. I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Oh, Disrupt Milwaukee. Yeah, I get confused.
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
Disrupt Milwaukee. Yeah. So
Mhm.
talking about like having fun with the things that we do, having fun with work when it's appropriate. And I have to go to this comment because it came through and it said, Carrie's being very sweet. Sorry, chief meeting officers, if you're online. So my next question is, what role does fun have in self-care? Because it's very important, but what is the role?
I think it's huge. I really do. And I think it's up to leaders to set the tone. And I think it comes naturally, like there's forced fun. And this is where I think people like team building has a bad reputation because it's like lame if it's forced fun. But again, back to the best way to be yourself, and then by virtue of being yourself, you're bringing out the best in other people, is to really have the confidence to bring forward what is uniquely you, right? So many people have the same job title, have the same roles, the same responsibilities, but no one can do it the way you do it because you're tapping into what makes you unique. So back to my example of my friend who loved to bake, somehow she found a way to bring that into work. That brought joy. That brought fun. And at the end of the day, if people have emotional connection to the people at work and to the work itself, and a lot of that is fostered by creating an environment where people can be more of themselves than not, that leads to that. And it leads to a vibrant, thriving workplace culture. And a big contributor to that is a sense of fun, and joy. And I think that, I do a lot of equity, diversity, inclusion consulting. And the whole purpose of that is to create a culture of belonging. And that has benefits beyond just people who might be in the minority in that culture, whether it be women or people of color, because research shows that 60% of employees mask a part of themselves at work. So it means that they try to hide or they cover an aspect of themselves at work so that they can fit in. And that includes everybody, so even white men. But what that ends up doing is if you're not comfortable really being who you are at work because you don't think the environment will allow it or you don't want to take the risk, you hide other parts of yourself. You don't really contribute fully to meetings. You might be afraid to speak up. I always say a good litmus test of if you have a culture of belonging is what are meetings like? Are people not speaking up? Are they just waiting for the most senior person to speak up? And when they do talk, they're just sort of reconfirming what that person said. You yourself, do you find yourselves often in meetings and saying, oh, I wish I would have said something, but I don't want to. I don't want to get ridiculed or I'm afraid of retribution, like lack of psychological safety. So that, when people aren't speaking up, you're not getting the best ideas, you're not getting the best decisions. But you're also not getting the best of people in terms of their uniqueness and what also leads to joy and fun. People are only comfortable having fun if you have that belonging and psychological safety. Otherwise, they're afraid they're going to get laughed out the door or ridiculed. Or, you know what I mean? So I think it's critical. But 2021, bring fun back into work. That should be the new tagline.
Yes, and as we digitize more, and the more digital meetings we are having, it's like don't hold back. It's not, you are at work when you are on Zoom, and you can have fun there too, and you can be yourself there. And
it's good point. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think
cut me off. Yeah, cut me off.
But by necessity, we are seeing more of who people are. So now you see this, and before we went on, I was I was panicked because I am so used to Zoom and having my virtual background. I was like, no virtual background. I was quickly cleaning up. You know what I mean? So you see a little bit about where I live, and that is kind of fun. You see people's kids and pets. It humanizes people, and that leads to belonging. So, again, not ideal, but there are some good aspects of this virtual culture that we should embrace. And I think that was one of them, being able to see people in their real environment. So we remember employees are people first.
Yeah. And I think my daughter made an appearance earlier on in the window back there.
Aww.
So I think that's a great point, Beth. And thank you for interrupting me for that. Or no, cutting me off. That's what you said. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, you can always, if you've got something important to say, go ahead, say it. So, and I completely lost track of where we are, but we're coming up on our quarter mark. So if anyone has questions for Beth, or want to have some comments, or has questions for me, now's the time. We're going to finish up with our last few questions, and then we're going to kind of summarize and, just summarize. So what are you planning next for the Brimful Life?
Well, okay, so that's what I mentioned. I want to complement the consulting work I do with leaders to what can I do to equip all employees to bring some of these principles that leads to more joy and meaning in whatever work that they have, and that they can bring more of their authentic selves into their work. Because again, the best way to be impactful is to love what you do, and that rubs off on everybody else, and it kind of like creates this thriving environment. So I'm really diving deep into that. And so like I mentioned, I launched this 3-week masterclass that just ended for women about how to find more joy and meaning in their work, and how to, again, tap into their strengths and what energizes them. And so it's sort of like 3 weeks of exercises, reflections, and really amazing guest speakers of people who have found ways to do that, either in their current job, or maybe by changing jobs, or maybe by having more of a self-directed career by becoming entrepreneurs. So I want to make sure that people have examples in all ways. So it just ended, but it was really super well received. The inaugural class, we had 30 people, all different stages in their careers, from kind of building their career to really thinking about what maybe they want to do right before retirement. And so the goal would be to launch that again in the fall. So I think it's just a really nice way of bringing both leadership accountability for how to create a thriving culture, but what can individual employees do, even if your leaders aren't working with me, and this is not anything on their radar screen. There's still so much that all of us can do that's within our control.
And is that the Make Your Mark?
Yes. It's called Make Your Mark. Yep. Yeah. So go to Make Your Mark, and then you'll see all about the masterclass that just ended, and you can put your name on the waiting list for the one in the fall. And I called it Make Your Mark because I think the best way to have impact is to do what lights us up inside. If you're doing something out of joy, you will have impact. If you're doing something because you have to or you hate it, that's a hard way to try to have impact.
Mm-hmm. And so what are your predictions for the rest of 2021, and how will your team at the Brimful Life be there to support organizations?
Yes. Okay, so for the predictions, and my team is just me, so that's easy to answer. What am I? So what am I going to be doing? So my prediction for 2021 is the year of the employee experience. I think, again, out of necessity, companies have leaned into things that really help to increase employee engagement, that sense of joy and meaning at work. So whether that be flexibility of where you work and how work gets done, more emphasis on mental wellness, and in addition to physical well-being, and again, that emotional connection. We're realizing and miss that emotional connection with our colleagues, and also emotional connection with work. I think, again, in the aftermath of George Floyd, employees are really demanding that I work for an organization that stands for something. So I definitely know people who have left their organizations because they didn't do anything. And they're really starting to wonder, does this company even align with my values? I've got choices here. So I think, again, companies have done things in this realm out of necessity, and realizing it actually works pretty darn good. Employee engagement actually increased in 2020 despite all the hardships. And I think a lot of that is because some of these things that companies are investing in that weren't on their radar screen before, that they realize really makes a difference. There's no turning back now. I think those things are only going to continue. And I think employees are in a position to ask for these things and require these things. And again, vote with their feet if they're not being met in the company that they're working for.
Yep. Vote with your feet and vote with your voice too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what is your call to action for HR pros that or anyone watching this live right now?
Mm-hmm. So I guess I would think about emotional connection. Well, okay, let me make a super, super simple call to action. Observe the next meeting that you're in and use that litmus test that I suggested. How are people interacting? Is there an active exchange of ideas, or are people holding back and waiting for the most senior person to talk before they just validate what that person said? That would give you a sense of the degree of belonging that you have or don't have. And then based on that, think of small, simple things that you can do to boost that sense of belonging. Well, I got some simple cards as a start. I mean, like $10, like you don't have to spend a lot of money. But again, it's all about pausing a little bit, showing curiosity in people, and I guess just treating employees like people first, not just workers. Asking someone what's going to make a difference for them to create a sense of belonging. But call to action is do that litmus test in your next meeting and at least get a sense. And then you'll sort of know, where you could take it from there, or email me for some suggestions on what to do next.
And if you are looking to contact Beth Ridley, you can do so via LinkedIn DM or contact us at www.thebrimfullife.com. Did you want to give your email too as well, Beth?
Oh, sure. It's Beth Ridley, Ridley at thebrimfullife.com. And so just to be like, I think you asked me this first question, what does the brimful life mean? It's actually living a life filled to the brim with joy and meaning. And when I first started my business, I was going to be holistic. I was going to be personal and professional life. And then my husband quickly reminded me, I have no business giving people relationship advice. So I lopped off all that professional stuff, and it's filled to the brim at work with joy and meaning.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So if anybody has a few questions for Beth, we can take one more question. And while I'm waiting for those questions or comments to come through, I'm just going to kind of like talk a little bit about what's coming up next for Progressive HR. So you can also follow me, Corinne Woodham-Hallebeck, and Progressive HR on LinkedIn, or follow #ResourcefulHumans. Coming up, next week is our live with Kieran Gilmurray out of Belfast, Ireland. We actually changed the title to this one. Now it says, how can HR support digital transformation? And those that are watching Progressive HR, following Progressive HR, know that the AI Journal in the UK just picked this up. So they posted on their page just this morning. So that's really a big pat on my back that I appreciate that they did that. So when I say pat on my back, I mean, like, obviously it's not just me, it's the followers of Progressive HR. So thank you very much for for following us and making sure that we have an impact, because we are making an impact. And then Nick Myers is coming back with Sonic Technology, about digitization and voice technology in the role of work. And Emma Roloff is coming back in March for her second part of Digital Transformation 2021. So we do have some comments here. Lisa says, I like Brim because it is your first two initials. Oh, that is correct. Yeah.
And Lisa was the one that had change the name of the meeting job too. You're good. Yeah. So I need to reach out for you for more marketing advice. You're good at that.
I think we found Lisa's strength. Well, Lisa may have always known her strength that she can bring. Heather says,
that point, one of the exercises with this Make Your Mark thing for people to find their strengths. Some people have been so strayed from their strengths or what brings them passion that they actually forgot. So one of the exercises is to ask other people what you're good at. And there's some fun questions to ask, because sometimes you need other people to tell you what your strengths are, because if it's you tend to minimize it. So that's actually another call to action that all of you can do, is ask people to describe one inanimate object that describes you. And that's a great way to uncover your strengths, so you can figure out how to do what you do in HR in your own unique way. So Lisa, I think one of your strengths is you're really good at, what's the word for it? Marketing, I guess? Maybe finding creative ways of
naming, yeah, metaphorically naming, yes. And Heather says, great conversation today. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining, Heather. Greatly appreciate you.
Thanks,
and Lisa says, great session. Thank you both for your time today. Thanks. Joanne says, great session. Thank you both for your time today. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. So everyone, this wraps us up. You guys, we can end about 5 minutes early so everybody can have a little break before they jump on that next Zoom call. Thank you so much, Resourceful Humans. Greatly appreciate you joining us today. Beth, thank you so very much. My friend that I have not seen for 2 years now. You're almost 2 years.
Time flies. Hard to believe.
I know. And I'm gonna come to Milwaukee as soon as I can.
I'll be here. But it's great to see virtually nonetheless.
I know. And Lisa says she'll explore more her next calling. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth and Corrine. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. All right, everybody. All right, Resourceful Humans. Let's go out there in the world and make an impact. Be the most unique and resourceful human you can be. All right. Thanks, everyone. Ending broadcast now. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.